Everybody, how are you doing out there? Don't make me take this mic off. Okay, yeah, he's already telling me not to touch the mic. It's too hot. Now look.
Wow, I like your beret.
Thank you.
I know green beret. What's a red beret?
I represent my group. It's called CASU. It's called Communist Anarchist Socialist United Front.
Oh my God, there's so many different movements in one name. So it's communist,
Anarchist, Socialist, United Front. Basically, we're everyone on the left united together.
So left is essentially communist slash socialist slash
anarchist slash anyone that have a caring bone in their body.
So do you think that Democrats have become, part of the left? I'm a little bit confused. I mean, Democratic Party seems to be, embracing left. Are you Democrat or are you left? I mean, how does that work, I wonder?
As long as you identify the problems of the world, as long as you want to break away from nationalism and decide to not care about race, religion, or ideology, you're among us.
Okay.
And you are with us. You're anti-fascist. You are here to provide a world of peace and love.
But as far as fascism is concerned, that's another thing that keeps confusing me. Because fascism, Nazism, it's the same thing, right?
Yes.
And Nazi stands for National Socialism. So aren't you supposed to embrace them, the Nazis, because they're socialists too?
Originally, the Nazis were called the NDAP, the Nationalist Workers' Party, German Workers' Party.
Okay, workers, socialists, same idea.
They changed it to socialists. They changed it to socialists in order to gain support of the people. Originally, they were just specifically a nationalist movement until several leftists did join. But then after Hitler gained the power, he basically massacred every single leftist among his ranks.
So you're saying they sort of changed the name, they added socialism just to confuse people?
Just so that people could support them.
So, but now you're saying you're socialist. I mean, maybe someone like me, would think that maybe you're also using socialism for the same reason. I mean, logically speaking, no?
When we use socialism, we go by the ideology that people deserve to be able to have basic needs. For example, they deserve to be able to have a home. They deserve to be able to have food. They deserve to be able to be taken care of. Because there are those that aren't able to take care of themselves. For example, those children and handicapped people.
But those who actually are not handicapped, I understand the handicap, I'm willing to help those. But, we have almost half of, about 40%, 47% or so of Americans who are able-bodied. And yet, they're kind of on the government's dole. Do you think it's the right thing to do? I mean, you can work and you don't. But they live off taxpayers like myself. What do you think?
That's why I personally go by to each their own ability and to each their own need. If you're able-bodied and you work, you should work. But at the same time, we should not. There's a difference between working and exploitation. You should live to work, not work to live.
Well, what is that supposed to mean? So you go to work when you feel like going to work?
You should be able to express your own creative ideas. You should be able to work because you enjoy it. Follow your dreams.
But what if you're lazy? I know so many people who are lazy. Given the opportunity, they will stay at home, play, whatever games, and do absolutely nothing. If we, the taxpayers, I assume you are a taxpayer, so are you a taxpayer, by the way? Do you pay taxes? So, I mean, why should we support them? It's just, it bothers me a little bit. I work, I pay 40 or so % of my taxes, to people who can work and they don't. Well, because they don't feel like working. Isn't that a little bit unfair? What do you think?
From that perspective, yes. But overall, we as humans, how we should work is that scientifically, we're supposed to be able to freely express our creative ideas.
Scientifically?
Yes. It's a biological thing, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Okay.
So through Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it would be survival, then friendship, and interpersonal relationships. And then after we get all that, we would have to go through transcendence or trying to go through our creativity. When you are a socialist, you're a socialist because you actually follow the ideas of socialism in which...
And what is that idea of socialism? That's another thing that I can understand. You know, the reason I can understand is because let's say I don't belong to any party. Let's say I came from Mars, and I look at different system here on Earth, and I see that socialism, or at least the countries that claim to be socialist, they murdered 100 million people in 100 years. By the way, this just a couple of days, November 7th, they're going to celebrate 100th anniversary of, you know, the first so-called socialist revolution. Look what happened in Russia: 50 million dead. China, 60 million dead. Cambodia, Vietnam, you know, Angola, Mozambique, Eastern Europe. The list goes on and on. I mean, were they not true socialists, or was it?
It was more experimental because socialism was a new idea.
Experimental at the cost of 100 million people? Really?
But regarding to the 100 million lives being lost, a lot of it was actually the 100 million lives being lost was a number made by the Big Black Book of Communism, and that book was known to not only be false, but was also known to be made by someone that's known to be anti-communist and anti-socialist.
So how many people do you think were murdered?
It was around maybe 10 million or under, but they weren't really murdered. It was more like because Russia back then and China back then, they were basically agricultural countries. And to be able to rival other countries, they had to quickly industrialize. So when you quickly industrialize and you don't plan for the backfall, you would lose a lot of lives. I'm not trying to be apologetic and say, and try to justify it, because it is wrong that a lot of lives are lost. But we should be able to differentiate between actual tyrannical governments murdering people and actual, like, the reality that, you know, the lives were lost was because of quick industrialization.
But do you think they were killing fields in the Soviet Union? I mean, the actual killing fields. Do you think they existed in the USSR?
According to statistics, facts, and numbers that the Soviet Union released after it fell, it was very unlikely, including the massive officer purge that Stalin did. The number was not only exaggerated, but actually the majority of the officers that were investigated and taken into custody were actually dismissed. Very few were actually executed, and very few were actually in prison.
Do you think that like kids at as early age as 13, or old people as old as like over 80 were murdered in the killing fields? Do you think that could have happened in the USSR?
I can't say for sure because I wasn't there. But according to statistical facts, there were people that died, but I'm not sure about what.
Well, I mean, from what I know, and actually recently learned, I happen to live in the USSR. And I learned recently that the place where my uncle actually still lives happens to be literally within walking distance from one of the largest, literally killing fields near Moscow. The range, the age of people that were murdered over there ranged, like I said, from 13 to over 80 plus. So can you imagine, you know, country killing a 30-year-old boy? I mean, what can possibly a 13-year-old boy do wrong?
But regarding to that, how sure are you, though, about the actual factual statistics?
Well, yeah, there's actual factual statistics. A day, sometimes on a good day, they would kill close to 600 people on a good day. For nothing. I mean, it was a killing field. There's a church over there. You can Google it, called Butovo. So Google Butovo. It's next to Sherbinka. Sherbinka is where I lived. So Butovo is literally within walking distance from where I used to live when I was a student. My uncle, like I said, still lives over there. The Russians themselves, they created a memorial, a little church over there. I mean, they admit that that's what's happening. These are Russian sources. I'm not making it up. So now, when you're saying that you're for socialism, how is your socialism going to be different and prevent from creation of these killing fields again? I mean, what are you going to do?
Because according to the Socialist Party back then, it relied on a specific vanguard authoritarian centralized government. A vanguard party, essentially.
Right.
Through us, we focus on separate communities because the only possible way one could be truly free is if instead of focusing on one centralized government, which is easier to corrupt and end up leading to tyranny, we would aim for we would basically aim for small individual independent communities, kind of like city-states in a way.
City-states, socialist city-states.
Yes.
And how can it change from the current capitalist system into socialist system? I mean, how can it convince me, for instance, that, well, socialism is the way to go when I actually lived this socialist dream of yours, and it was a nightmare. So, I mean, convince me that socialism is a good thing. Let me go back, convince me to go back to where I lived until the age of 29. Can you?
Yes.
Okay.
For example, when I say independent community city-states, think about it like instead of one person being up top and then having the economy go down each to individual person to try to get some form of wealth to live. Think of through the means of production, every single person is able to live in a home.
But how is gonna this person get the home?
Through the community.
And
it's a communal effort.
So how is the community gonna work? Let's say I want to mention I don't want to have just a home that has 1 or 2 bedrooms. I want to mention that it has 10 bedrooms. So what are you gonna do with me if that's what I want?
We would go through dialectics. We would basically debate.
If
Yes, we would go together. We would debate, argue, see your argument, see.
Okay, I want the house. Give me.
We would go through the debate, see the argument, see the validity, and then we would try to debate with you, try to make a compromise. That's usually how it goes regards to dialectical reasoning. And as for how to go against, for example, like capitalist companies, socialist cooperatives. I know one in North Carolina right now that is an insurance company. What they do is they essentially, everyone pitches in to keep the company afloat, but through their own specific client or through their own specific product that they made, they get their share. Like, for example, there is no CEO, there's no company owner. Instead, the person gets the payment.
How do you make decisions then?
When you make a socialist cooperative, you could have a manager. But the thing is, the manager is not allowed to exploit. Everyone works together.
But what's exploitation in your mind? If I hire you, and I have my own business, by the way, and I have 10 people working for me, is it exploitation and they're happy being with me? They could have left my company a long time ago. They've been with me, some of them over a decade. So is this exploitation, me giving them job and reasonable wages, comparable wages to what they do, or is it exploitation? That's another thing that kind of confuses me.
From your perspective, no.
Okay.
But we have to look at it from a broader perspective. From your company specifically, no, it might not be exploitation, but your company is also relying on an economy that is specifically out of theory.
What do you mean theory? It's practice. It's a viable company that's making a profit,
but
employs 10 people,
but economics
pays the bills. So
economics itself is a theory.
Well, you can talk. Socialism is theory. Capitalist system is the reality, and this is the reality we live in this beautiful country of ours. Like I said, I came from the country, socialist country. There was nothing. I mean, demonstrating like this in the USSR, forget about it. You'll be whisked away. They'll be murdered. If not on the spot, maybe in the 1930s. But at the time when I lived, they'll be whisked away, sent to Gulag, and chances are your mother and father would never hear from you again.
Because I came from Vietnam.
Oh, that you should know better, man. Vietnam. Viet Cong. Really? You came from Vietnam? How old were you when you came from Vietnam?
I was born in Vietnam. I came to the United States when I was young.
How old?
I don't remember.
Okay, I mean, older than 10 or younger than 10, let's say?
I think maybe older than 10.
Older than 10?
Yeah.
Okay, let's say 12, 13.
Yeah.
So you got your education, everything else here. I mean, you remember Vietnam, like I guess my fellow Russians, citizens who didn't live in the USSR, they only have like good memories, maybe, of USSR after coming over here. But I actually lived the horrors of socialism. You should know better your history. How many people Ho Chi Minh murdered in Vietnam? Coming from Vietnam, you're advocating for socialism. Really? That's the first one.
The thing is in Vietnam, how it is it's split into separate capitalist sectors. For example, the big cities have state capitalism.
There is such a thing as state capitalism. It's an oxymoron. It's either capitalism or it's socialism. I mean, state-owned, like in Vietnam, everything was owned by the Vietnamese government. Didn't Ho Chi Minh kill millions of fellow Vietnamese?
That was a rumor.
It was a rumor too. So do you know anyone who was a relative who had his relatives murdered by the regime? Do you know anyone in Vietnam?
I know a lot of people.
You know a lot of people had relatives who had relatives murdered by the regime, right or wrong?
Yes, and that's because they're part of they were responsible for massacring Buddhists for the South Vietnamese government.
So there were people who were murdered by the government without due process, right, in Vietnam. And you just admitted that you know a lot of people who were murdered for no reason whatsoever.
No, what I was saying was that during the Vietnamese War,
Uh-huh.
the South Vietnamese government, the one that was funded by
I'm
the
talking
US,
about Ho Chi Minh. I'm not talking about South Vietnam. I'm
No.
talking about the period of Ho Chi Minh after the war, Vietnam
and I
War.
said the people
Uh-huh.
that were murdered by the people that were executed by Ho Chi Minh,
Uh-huh.
that were relatives of the people I know, they were responsible. They were the ones responsible for murdering Buddhists for the South Vietnamese government. That's why they were executed.
So you don't know anyone who was like an ordinary citizen murdered by Ho Chi Minh regime, right? You don't know anyone. Okay. Okay, well, what can I say? Good luck with your socialist. What's this? What's the schedule?
It's the dates for the.
All right. Okay, so what they're trying to achieve now, being here? What's the goal? What? What happened? What's that? Я тебя люблю. How so?